Welcome to the D Word by Peace Vigil. D stands for difference, a word that is often the cause of fear, divisions, and violence. In the D Word series, we talk to people about their experiences with difference, how it impacted their lives, and what they think of it. By hearing their stories, we can all examine for ourselves whether there are things that we could infer from their experiences. If you like this video, please do remember to share it, and if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please do so now. Thank you.
Welcome to the D Word. D stands for difference, and difference is often seen as a source of fear, division, and ultimately hate and violence. But is difference necessarily bad? Does it have to be a source of fear and hate? Is it possible that what we consider different from us actually becomes part of our own identity because we like it or see in it a reflection of who we are? Can we embrace the other to the extent that we are no longer different from them but a part of them? Today we'll be talking to Gurmehar Kaur, a writer and a radio and video broadcaster. Her personal story is unusual. She was born a Hindu and decided to become a Sikh later in life. For most of us, religion is not a matter of choice. It is what we are born with. Sometimes people change their religion, but it is not so common, and when that happens, most people in society find it strange. Some are even angry about it. Today, we learn about Gurmehar's life, which is unusual in other respects too. For example, she works for both Indian and Pakistani news portals, The Wire, Naya Daur, and Mutabdil. She also has deep love for both India and Pakistan, two seemingly enemy nations, for their people, their poetry and prose, their movies and music. Welcome, Gurmehar Kaur.
Bahut shukriya ji, thank you.
My very first question to you, Gurmehar, is how do you define yourself? What is your identity?
Gee, I think I can best define myself by sort of opening with an Urdu couplet, as is often my recourse. And Baqaul Shair, किसी को घर से निकलते ही मिल गई मंजिल, किसी को घर से निकलते ही मिल गई मंजिल, कोई हमारी तरह ताउम्र सफर में रहा. So I see myself very much as a traveler who is trying to take from life not much more than she can give back. I'm very much a person who's trying to work, strive towards a place where she has more personal and professional options. And jaisa ki aapne farmaya, I am an ever-struggling writer and a radio and video broadcaster. I've been associated with The Wire in India and Naya Daur in Pakistan. And I see myself, the sort of words that come to mind in terms of self-image I see myself as progressive, as sensitive, as someone who tries to be honest and is communicative. But I suppose a lot of people see themselves in similar terms. It's how you define these words, progressive, sensitive, communicative, honest. A lot of us would see ourselves in such terms, but it's how you define these terms that makes a difference. And so very much a work in progress and a traveler.
That's
the long answer to your short question.
No. That's the kind of answer we want, because when it comes to identity, it's such a complicated thing, and I don't think there can be a short answer.
आपने identity का जिक्र किया, माजरत, आपने identity का जिक्र किया, and you also talked about my embracing Sikhism. So I should add, and this is basically drawing from a recent social media post of mine where I also defined myself in religious terms, and I said that I'm a Sikh by faith, a Muslim by culture, and I'm Hindu by heritage. I'm a friend of Kashmiris, and I'm a lover of many things Pakistani. So I see myself as all of these things. To some other people, it may seem odd, or it may seem like I'm trying too hard to be too many things to too many people. But for me, Yaqeen Janiye, it is really seamless. I don't try to be many things to many people. And I think a lot of us, they see as people of South Asian origin, wherever in the world we are right now. If we dig a little bit deeper, we will find all these aspects to us. We are made up of many parts and more than we might acknowledge.
Yeah, actually, when we do our workshops on identity, and I think the last one, yes, that board, I think has some stuff on identity. One of the things that we realize is that the given is so little, right? I mean, when we are told to introduce ourselves, it's pretty much our name, and our name in South Asia carries a part of our identity in terms of religion and caste and even region. But there's so much to one's identity, right? I mean, the name is only something that's given to you by your family, and then you acquire so many experiences throughout life, whether it is in your school or in your neighborhood or in the wider world where you work. For example, I'm here in South Africa, and having lived here for many years, I have taken in a lot from my surroundings, from the languages spoken around me, even things that I wear. So as you're saying, it's really seamless, and if we think about it, it's a very complicated, multi-layered thing. So
Right.
thank you for talking in detail about your identity. From your name, Gurmehar, one would think that you are Sikh, and you did become a Sikh. So tell us a little bit about that. And you also said something very beautiful, that from a religious point of view, you are Sikh, heritage is Hindu, and culturally you are Muslim. So I'd like you to expand on that a bit. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful way to define yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I have to say that I have formally embraced Sikhism, so ceremoniously and all the rest of it. And so Gurmehar is a name I'm happy to have, because it has the word Guru in it. So it's Guru ki meher. So it has the Farsi word meher, Farsi being such a, gorgeous language and also part of our heritage by way of Urdu. And so I feel very blessed that my name has the Guru's name as well as the Farsi loves meher, and making it Guru ki meher, Guru di meher, Gurmehar.
So
And
how would you translate that into English for our viewers who don't know the
it's sort
language?
of basically, by the grace of the Guru, and the Sikh faith was founded by Guru Nanak Dev Ji. So Guru being your teacher. And the word Sikh itself means jo seekhte hain wo Sikh hote hain. So it by definition means somebody who is forever a student, forever learning.
Yes.
So the word Sikh comes from Sikhna.
Yeah. So
ਜਿਹੜੇ
no,
ਸਿੱਖਦੇ
no,
ਆ
but I meant your name would be the blessing of the Guru,
the
right?
blessing of the Guru.
Yes,
Meher,
yes,
the
meher.
Farsi word meher, the Persian word meher.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's what it would be. That's what it would mean. And I find it interesting that for a lot of people, especially from our part of the world, from South Asia, conversion is something they typically associate with marriage.
Yes.
That if you're getting married to someone of a different faith, one or the other person might convert. It's not something they see that a person will do of her own, his or her own volition, as I did. And also, I don't see it as a rejection of Hinduism or a negation of Islam, that why not, if you see yourself so immersed in what is broadly called Muslim culture, although I would avoid that term, I would avoid using that term too much or belaboring that point, because what we call Muslim culture is also influenced by other elements. But, so it is not that I was born in a family of, a largely Hindu family, though not entirely, largely Hindu family. So it is not a negation or a rejection of Hinduism or a negation of Islam. It is its own thing. But I will add that I do value the fact that Sikhism has always been a bridge between Hinduism and Islam. So that is something of value to me, and especially someone who's interested in interfaith solidarity work. I find it valuable that, that it is a faith that has served to be a bridge between Hinduism and Islam. And even in terms of its substance, it draws from the Sufi tradition, it draws from the Bhakti tradition, and it tries to do away with some of the problems, the more problematic aspects of both faiths. But of course, दूध का धुला तो कोई नहीं होता, Sikh kaum bhi दूध की धुली नहीं है, as the Sikhs also have their own scope for reform and all of that. So I don't idealize any community, but I chose this path for a host of reasons. Yeah.
And it's also the youngest in the religions that you have mentioned, and perhaps as we move forward, we improve, perhaps. I don't know. I think we take from experiences and try and improve. perhaps. What do you think?
But perhaps, I mean, I feel that, like all communities have scope for evolution, all religious groups have scope for evolution, so do Sikhs. I mean, there are, in terms of lived reality, there's one thing that's, that the faith talks about, and there's another aspect which is our lived reality. And sadly, caste is an issue in the Sikh community. So you have Mazhabi Sikhs, who are basically Dalit Sikhs, who definitely don't have the same standing as, say, so-called higher caste Sikhs, and the faith is completely anti-caste. But in lived reality, that does happen. And so I think all communities have scope for, I again hesitate to use the word reform, because some people resist that, because they believe that, their faith is perfect the way it is. So that's their position to have. I would definitely say that all communities have scope to evolve. Let's put it that way.
And also cultural practices, as you say, are the lived reality of any community. Ultimately, it's the society that has to reform, and you could be from any religion and still work for those rights.
Sure. And I should add, since we're talking about faith, that I have through my formative years up until now been very influenced by Mahatma Gandhi. So he was a man of faith, and so I feel that in living as I have for most of my life in South Asia, and now being US based, or sort of dividing my time between India and the US, I feel that faith is central to many people's lives in South Asia, in India, Pakistan. And I feel that while it is not obligatory upon anyone to be a person of faith, I have a lot of friends, from the left spectrum of things, and they have remarkable insight into so many issues, and I really value them for that. So it is not incumbent upon anyone to be a person of faith, but I do feel that it does give you a certain kind of access sometimes to make an intervention or to work towards reform from within. That maybe sometimes being totally on the outside may not. Although, there are various aspects to engaging with people, and people from the left engage with workers especially, and really understand the best of them really understand their issues and their problems and all of that. So there are various ways of coming at it, but I was influenced by Mahatma Gandhi, who was a reformist. And my own instincts are, I have to say, more reformist than inqilabi, than revolutionary, because I do feel that, the best kind of change and lasting change is incremental and comes, it doesn't have to be slow, but it is usually incremental. And I'm not a big one for violent revolution or, that's my personal take. Yeah.
Unfortunately, many people do associate revolution with violence, and that is historically wrong, because revolutions have taken place within religions and societies. Very, very life-changing things have happened without violence. So unfortunately, the way history is taught, revolution is always associated with violence. But
which is why I said violent revolution. I didn't just say revolution.
No, but I'm saying I think when people think of revolutionaries as
they think of
inherently
bloodletting.
Violent.
They think of bloodletting.
But that is not the case. So Gurmehar, tell me, when you as you say, you embraced Sikhism, what was the reaction of your family? Were they happy about it? Did they understand it, or what was their reaction?
My family has been largely supportive. I mean, there's a two-part answer to this. There's my nuclear family, my parents and my brother, my younger brother, and there's the extended family. So my nuclear family was supportive. And also, I am of mixed heritage. I do have Sikhs in my extended family, so it was not such a shocker for them. Mm-hmm. But I have to say that there were people in my extended family who didn't give it the gravitas it deserves, who took it as a bit of a, maybe not a gimmick, but, I guess as they see, people are not used to, religion is something that you get by default, by birth. They can't sort of, get a grip around the fact that someone can make a more conscious, choice as far as religion goes. So I think some of them have kind of not been respectful of the fact that every soul has a journey, and that journey must be respected. It shouldn't be ridiculed, mocked, or seen as gimmicky. At least, not until proven otherwise. You should start from a position of accepting it in good faith, as it were, and then make up your mind. Mm-hmm. So I have to say, in my extended family, there it's been mixed. but my immediate family was supportive. And I have to say, this is, I'm joking, but only half joking here, that I'm told, I've learned from the family grapevine that there were some people in my extended family who, because I move around a lot in quote unquote Muslim circles, partly because of my interests and partly because of work that I do with minority issues. So I learned from some people in my family through the family grapevine that some people said, "Ki shukar hai Musalman to nahi bani." Thankfully, she didn't become a Muslim, because they had this fear that I might become a Muslim, and as if it is something to fear. So I'm joking, but only half joking when I tell you that these anxieties and this Islamophobia is also so real in today's India, that for people to react in that way.
It is extremely sad that we are in this situation. Every month, twice a month, we have a workshop called Know Anyone Who Hates Muslims. And the kind of stories we hear in those workshops, not only from Muslims, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking what is happening in society. And you're labeled so quickly. You don't even have to be a Muslim. As soon as you show any interest or just you say things against, say, the lynching of Muslims or Christians, you're branded very quickly as anti-Hindu or anti-Indian. And we must, wherever we are, fight against that kind of hate and propaganda. Tell me, Gurmehar, how did you develop an interest in Pakistan and also in Urdu and Urdu poetry? I know that you spent a long time in Delhi, but is that the only factor when it comes to Urdu poetry?
Yeah, well, Urdu is part of it is organic, because my father was born in Lucknow. तो मेरा ऐसा है कि मेरा विरसा साझा है, in the sense कि लखनऊ से भी आशनाई है, पंजाब से भी वाबस्तगी है. So I have sort of an association with Punjab, as well as an attachment to Punjab, let's say, and an association with Lucknow as well. So it's part of it is organic. It is not something I consciously strived for. It was in the mahal and all the rest of it. And then Delhi, yes, of course, I've lived. My father was in government service, so he moved around, but more years in Delhi than anywhere else. So Delhi ka mahal, Delhi ki taseer. Then I went to Jamia Millia Islamia for my master's. My bachelor's was Delhi University, College of Jesus and Mary, but my master's was Jamia Millia Islamia. Then I was in Dubai and Sharjah for long years. And there I worked in a Pakistani-owned, Pakistani-managed station. So my bosses, my co-workers, even my flatmate of that time, my world was peopled by Pakistanis. So long years there. And then also I've lived for a long time in Kashmir as well. So all of this came to create a world where I was peopled by a lot of it was a world that was peopled by Urdu speakers, So and then of course I'm from North India, so I speak Hindustani basically, but which is an amalgamation of Hindi and Urdu. But yes, my slant is more towards Urdu. I mean, when people speak Hindustani, they can have a slant that is more Hindi or more Urdu. So mine would be more Urdu, but I would not say that I speak, sort of puritanical. I'm not puritanical about my use of the Urdu language, but definitely I have a great love for the language, a great amount of affection for the language. And it's also opened up a world for me, which has been so beautiful. And after Pakistan ka zikr kiya, Pakistan is, even before I landed up in Dubai, Sharjah, where I had Pakistani co-workers, it's very sad that, you can be in Delhi and you can't meet someone in Lahore, but you can meet in a third country.
Yes.
You can't meet someone who's in a neighboring city virtually. True. But anyway, so even before I went to Dubai, Sharjah, where I had Pakistani co-workers, when I was barely 13, 14, and we started to get these Pakistani dramas, TV dramas on video cassette, that's kind of when the seduction started to happen. And to me, it was like this magical world that I had entered. I mean, I was a 13-14 saal ki ladki, and to have these people, speak in what seemed to me at that time a very cultured kind of lehja, very cultured tonality, and it seemed like a magical world to me. So it started with that, and then and then went from there. And then of course they became very real to me. It started with a kind of idealizing of them, but when I lived and worked in Dubai, Sharjah, they became very real to me. So they were good, bad, indifferent. And I think that's the best way to look at a group of people is to
Actually,
see them is to see them as human.
yes.
Even when you idealize someone too much, you are othering them, I feel. आप उनको कुछ पराया बना देते. You make them, someone, even by idealizing them. So I think just to see people, their humanity became all too real to me. And I love their humor, in the humor in their pop culture. That's just a personal thing I have, So which is not to say that I don't love Hindi. Like the more Sanskritized kind of Hindi that some people, especially the more literary ones, write and speak. अच्छी हिंदी भी बहुत मधुर लगती है जिसे कहते हैं, like it sounds beautiful, but it's just that I have a thing for Urdu. That's a personal thing, everybody. And that's also sad that in today's India you have to explain it so much that
exactly.
One shouldn't have to. I mean, everybody has a thing for something, that wonderful American throwaway expression that I have a thing for it.
Yeah.
But which is not to say that I can't appreciate good Bangla or good Hindi or any language for that matter.
Yeah. It's not like you dislike other things. You just like this more, So, yeah.
And we often joke, between me and my friends, there's a running joke. My friends joke कि शायद तुम पिछले जन्म में मुसलमान थी. तो हाँ, मुझे लगता है कि मेरा कोई पिछले जन्म का नाता है मुसलमानों के साथ. So that's a kind of running joke between us.
क्या पता,
नहीं हो भी सकता है.
अब क्या इसके बारे में तो कोई कुछ नहीं कह सकता. But one thing that I would really like to discuss with you, and I read something that you had written, that when you talk about, I think you were talking about Muslims in it, and you said in that post that, look, I have never said that Muslims are like the best people. All I'm saying is that, they are also humans like me. And that basic understanding is missing. It's because we have been compartmentalized. So, you are either this or that. You can't be accepting or embracing different things from different streams. And what you said about, idolizing things and then finding out later on, it wasn't like this. It's like we used to watch those movies, right? Taj Mahal and Mere Mehboob and so on. I mean, we know for certain that most Muslims don't live like that. Muslims have also their lived realities, just like Hindus do and Christians do. But it's only when you know enough people, that your understanding is not just coming from Hindi cinema or, from जो पाकिस्तानी dramas होते हैं. जब आपकी understanding उसके beyond जाती है with real people, then you realize, okay, I have to accept that they are also humans like me. They have the same problems. They also have the same vices. And they also have the same beauty in their lives. So please tell me a little more about how you found, living in different parts of the world, how people come in different packages.
Yeah. I can come at it from a couple of angles. One was for one, I lived with a Pakistani woman. I mean, we were flatmates. So that was very educative for me. I have memories of how, I remember it was the month of Ramzan and she was fasting. And I was not, but I was not much of a cook and still am not much of a cook, but she would still cook for me. So I was eating all meals through the day. And she was fasting and she would still cook for me. And I'm still endlessly moved by that, And of course, our friendship has had its own journey and graph and ups and downs. But I will always remember that and really cherish that. So that for me, is tarah ki baatein, a lot of people think that is this something out of a film, or are you trying to be, you're trying to sugarcoat your life experiences or whatever? No, but these are very real things. And at the same time, I've had... when your world is peopled largely by, I like to say that, my world starts with inshallah and ends with mashallah, which is just a light-hearted way of saying that I have, I, for various reasons, have come to be in a world which is peopled largely by Muslims and all sorts of Muslims, because they're human beings and insan har tarah ka hota hai, they're all sorts of people. So I've also had, so the good I meet is from that community, the bad I meet is from that community, and the indifferent are also from that community. So that has humanized them more than anything else. And it's also made me realize, it's made me realize more than anything else that everybody, and with obviously Muslims being no exception, is, again, I mean, this may sound like a very Hindi filmy line, but I have really come to believe that har insan wakai pyar ka bhuka hai. People are so hungry for love. And Muslims more than anybody else in today's India, because they are so shunned and so ostracized. So it's just been endlessly moving, to see how much they give back. आप इतना सा हाथ बढ़ाते, you just stretch your hand a little bit and they'll embrace you, most people. So for me, it's just been, I've got much more from the Muslim community than I have given, than I can ever hope to give, I mean, culturally, they've been so giving with their knowledge of culture, language, so many other things. And of course, there are issues. There are issues and there are challenges. But one thing that I always say to people who are non-Muslims who have these, who have these questions based largely on ignorance. Because it's sad to see that in India, Muslims are 17 to 18%, they say informally. And most people in my extended family, which is not a very rich family, which is middle to upper middle class mostly, some even lower middle class, most of them, like almost all of them, have not one Muslim friend. Now, when people are 18% of your population, और आपका एक भी मुसलमान दोस्त नहीं है, you don't have even one Muslim friend, that just shows how much you have shunned them and how much you have kept them out of your scope of life. So a lot of the othering is because of lack of knowledge.
Lack of knowledge, and also, unfortunately, information that is wrong. Their exposure to who a Muslim is or what a Muslim looks like is coming from media that is biased and from movies that stereotype. So you're right that unless you know the other, how are you gonna ever understand the other? And we also say in our workshops that knowing one or two people, it's better than not knowing. But knowing a community is what's going to change your life. Just knowing one person, because you see, even in religious riots, the so-called riots, there are many instances where people save their neighbor, a neighbor who's from another religion. But that doesn't mean they're not communal. They're only doing it because their child was playing with their neighbor's child, they know them personally. Doesn't make them secular or, non-communal. That fighting of communalism in society and countering it can only happen when there is community to community contact, which in India lacks. At least, in the last 20 years or so, it hasn't been promoted at all. So, when it comes to community, and I know that you mentioned interfaith, what has your experience been?
Right. No, I stress upon it greatly, especially in societies like ours, like India, Pakistan, Kashmir, which are where a lot of people are immersed in faith, and faith is central to their life, less or more. So I think it's we can't pretend that faith is not a reality, even if we are some people may not be into organized religion or may define themselves as spiritual but not religious, or maybe completely atheist or agnostic. I mean, people come from various people have various persuasions, and that's fine. But the fact of the matter is that for a large majority, the vast majority of South Asians, wherever in the world they may be now, faith is central to their lives, or it's relatively significant at any rate. So I think it is helpful it's helpful as one approach to work in the interfaith space. There are various ways of coming at it. There's workers' solidarity, there are women's movements, there are, people working with sexual minorities and so many things. But interfaith is a very valid way of coming at it, especially in cultures like ours. And again, I draw inspiration from people like Gandhi and many others. I mean, I know that Gandhi is the most famous of them all, and there are many people who've done as much work who are less famous. But I come from that tradition where he didn't just talk about tolerance, that you can tolerate the other. He talked about developing your muscle of empathy and affection, to look upon your Muslim neighbor or your Christian or your Sikh neighbor or your Hindu neighbor with great affection. So not just tolerating, but looking upon them with great affection, which I think I should add that off late there has been in some circles a critique of Gandhi, and of course he as any heroic figure should be up for and open to critique. I mean, the persona, the personhood, the myth of that person should be interrogated by all means. But I feel that in doing that, we shouldn't minimize the fact that he played a role as an interfaith leader, as an interfaith solidarity leader, which is the crying need in today's India, So what happens is that if people who are espousing the right cause, if people are espousing the right cause but are if it seems to a group, like say the Hindu community, that you are dissing us, then a person like Gandhi becomes very important in that kind of case, because he was a practicing Hindu who had such a lively love for the Muslim community, and it not condescendingly so, but who had a lively love for the Muslim community. So I feel that Gandhi is important to embrace in today's times, because he made the point by his personhood and his life that you can be a practicing Hindu and still have great love for people of other faiths, see the best in them, learn from them.
True.
So in that sense,
he actually said that tolerance is a bad word, because when we are tolerating somebody, we are coming from a superior attitude, and we are telling the other, we are letting you exist. But that's not the point. The point is that everyone has the right to not only exist, but coexist beautifully and happily and with rights.
Right. And this demand of perfection from our heroes, especially those heroes whose legacy is very important to us right now, because of the way communal relations are so fraught in India right now, that the legacy of someone who played such a great role in bringing people together is so important. And to expect perfection from heroic figures, is unfair, because if we had if we applied those same exacting standards to some other people, they would fall short.
Of course.
So heroes are flawed, but that doesn't mean that we can't draw inspiration from them.
True. And he largely did good, right? I mean, all of us have good and bad in us. If you look at what he contributed to society, it is far greater than the things that we can criticize him upon. And I totally agree.
And he had his own journey.
Yeah,
he had his own journey. So even, fraught topics like caste, and of course, caste is a very valid thing to interrogate, talk about, and of course should be completely abolished and done away with. But even Gandhi's views on caste were evolving and growing. So in some ways, he was a product of his times. In other ways, he was ahead of his times. Like we all are, we're all a mix. Yeah. So to hold against him his beliefs on caste at age 22, when at age 54 he had a different take, is also unfair. So, like I said, every hero is up for interrogation, but heroes like Gandhi, who spoke for interfaith solidarity, should be embraced now, because more than ever we need to come together. And we need to take allies wherever we can get them. Instead of saying कि मैं सुर्खी हूँ, सुर्खा हूँ, I'm a lefty, so मैं यहाँ नहीं जा सकता, यहाँ से मेरा ally नहीं हो सकता. If I'm if I come from the left tradition, I can't have a person of faith as an ally. Or if I'm a person of faith who is who has a pro-poor sensibility, who's alive to workers' rights, I can ally with someone from the left. And these alliances should happen across these divides. That is so important,
Most of the times, a lot of people who are working in progressive circles alienate everybody around them. And the need of the hour is to make alliances. Of course, that doesn't mean that you compromise on your values and what you stand for. But allies are needed in these times when things are so tough. We also have to be diplomats. And, Gandhi was, before anything else.
He was a very tactful person, a man of tact. And speaking of tact, I would say to anybody who is watching and who is working who's political or is a political worker of any sort, that Hindus are nearly 80% of India. So we need to appeal to the conscience of our Hindu brothers and sisters. And of course, many amongst them are जिसे कहते हैं बाज़मीर लोग हैं, उनमें कई हिंदू बाज़मीर हैं, they are people of conscience. We need to appeal to their conscience, and we can't do that if we seem, I'm not saying we are, but if we seem like we're anti-Hindu, we will not make much headway there. But one of the things is that one of the problems right now plaguing the Hindu community is that a lot of outreach is happening from Muslims, from other people. Muslims are reaching out to them. But I feel that a lot of the times Hindus are resisting. And that's because of their own complexes that have been triggered. And I do believe that, when we talk about Hindutva, which we make a distinction between Hinduism and Hindutva, Islam and Islamism, and Islamic and Islamist. So I feel that when we talk about Hindutva, the beating heart of Hindutva is the crisis of Hindu masculinity. It is such a big throbbing crisis, that this crisis that of Hindu masculinity, which basically has them believing, and this has been passed down through propaganda, everything from WhatsApp propaganda to subliminal messaging over the decades, because the RSS, of course, saw this as a 100-year dream to have a Hindutva state. So this crisis of Hindu masculinity, where they basically have these three core beliefs, कि मुसलमान आए, उन्होंने हम पे हमला किया, हमारे खजाने लूटे, हमारे मंदिर तोड़े, हमारी औरतों को अगवा किया, that Muslims invaded our country, they demolished our temples, they robbed our our treasury, they abducted our women, और ये सब ये इसलिए कर पाए क्योंकि हम कमजोर पड़ गए थे. अब हम कमजोर नहीं रहेंगे, हमने हाथों में चूड़ियां नहीं पहन रखी, that horrible sexist phrase. So this belief that they did this, they were able to do this because we were not quote unquote man enough, and now we will be real men and we will stop them from doing these things. So these real and mostly imagined, mostly almost entirely imagined historical grievances, this tendency to lump all Muslims together as invaders. I mean, Muslims did come to India at a certain historical point. They came in various ways. They came as traders, as invaders, as people to spread the faith, and in so many ways. And many made India their home and now have lived here for 1,000 years, ancestrally speaking, treating it as their home. The Mughals treated India as their home. They didn't, loot and go back. They treated India as their home. So, sab Musalmanon ko ek usme dal dena that all Muslims who live in South Asia are invaders. Whereas it's so much more complex than that. And there have been non-Muslim invaders. There have been Hindu rulers who have demolished and and looted and done those kinds of things. So I feel that what's happening is that while there is a great outreach, the Muslim community is making an effort to reach out to Hindus. It's very moving to see because of this complex. I mean, the thing with the complex, I feel, is whether it's an inferiority complex or a superiority complex. The thing with the complex is that it will impact your personality and it will pervert and distort your character. And there is a reverse complex as well, which is not there in Indian Muslims so much, but I find it's there in Pakistani masculinity. And it was pointed out to me by a Pakistani male friend, in fact. And then when he remarked upon it, I realized that it existed, that a lot of Pakistani men have a superiority complex. No, maybe not a lot, but a fair number, just the way a lot of Hindu men have an inferiority complex or an inverted superiority complex. So, a complex is a complex, and it will distort. Eventually, it begins by affecting your personality, but eventually it distorts character. मतलब पहले उसका शख्सियत पे असर पड़ता है, लेकिन आखिर में जाके वो किरदार पे उसका असर पड़ता है. तो any complex is a bad thing, and basically it's crisis of masculinity, which I feel is at the heart of the beating heart of Hindutva. तो उसकी वजह से मुसलमान reach out भी करते हैं, मुसलमान हाथ भी आगे बढ़ाते हैं, तो कई बार ऐसा होता है कि हिंदू वो हाथ नहीं थामते.
It is a very interesting analysis, Gurmehar, especially considering things like love jihad and the triple talaq thing, which both target
Anand Patwardhan
Muslim...
Sahab, Anand Patwardhan, the famous documentary filmmaker who made Father, Son and Holy War, Pita, Putra, Dharm Yudh. I draw heavily from his work, and it is his thesis also, and I've seen it borne out in my life as with many innumerable lived reality examples. But it is essentially his thesis.
It's very interesting, and I'd love to dig deeper into it. I do find that the male chauvinism in all societies is at the heart of many problems, and in India that is made more complex by the caste system, because there is such a great hierarchy. For instance, the Brahmin man is then superior than the Kshatriya man. The Kshatriya man is superior than the Vaishya, and then the Vaishya is superior. So it's even within males there is that caste hierarchy.
Yes,
and everyone is under somebody, but then everyone is also proud to be above somebody. So even within the Shudras,
and even within the there are subcastes even within the so-called lower caste.
Exactly.
And I think caste is such a scourge that it has institutionalized the sense of inequality in our society. कि गैर बराबरी तो होगी ही. We've internalized it to such an extent because of the scourge of caste, for which there is no excuse here.
True. And I think that inferiority complex which comes by being part of the caste hierarchy and also the whole male female thing, but that because you are at any level, I mean, except for the very few, you will always be under someone, you'll be inferior to someone. And I think that complex will push you towards saying, oh well, but I'm better than them because they eat meat and I don't, so I'm cleaner. Or they have 4 wives and look at their values and morals, look at me, I am better.
Or that I'm a cobbler and he's a sweeper.
He's a sweeper. Yeah. No, but I'm talking more in terms of like religion, because the hierarchy divides you. And the only way you can unite everybody in this hierarchical structure is by opposing somebody else. So if you say, well, we are all Hindus, even though we are all divided, and we hate each other because of the caste system, but there's somebody else that we can all put our hate on, focus our hate on. And I think actually, if there were no Muslims in India, Hindutva wouldn't be there, because
Hindu society they'd be warring with each other. And also, there's this thing in human nature, sadly, across religious divides, where people tend to bond bond over gossip, and gossip of the sort where they're dissing someone else. So to use the sort of, to make it a pastime to diss Muslims, for instance, is a way in which people have started bonding, if one may use the word bonding in such a context. So to have, like you aapne bilkul sahi kaha ki jis tarah se, to have a shared enemy, to have this notion of an enemy, and and to bond, to use that as a way to bond, instead of finding something constructive, giving back to society in a constructive way, and making that a project, a common project, working for the greater common good, making that something to bond over. You're bonding over the fact that, oh, let's get together and talk about how awful Muslims are.
Gurmehar, I think in this, the work on psychology that we do, psychology of hate and psychology of support for hate, we have found that, this is directly linked with the crisis of capitalism. The more we live in societies where our worth is because of certain things that we acquire and not because of what we give back, leads to a situation where communalism or casteism or racism become the things to do. I mean, they are the things that attract you. And unfortunately, you end up supporting people who are promoting that kind of hate and violence in society.
And there is, in India, there is definitely a class aspect to the Hindu-Muslim dynamic, because when the subcontinent was partitioned, a lot of the elite amongst the Muslim community migrated. Not all, but a big chunk of the elite Muslims migrated. And a lot of the Muslims who stayed back were people jinke haath mein hunar tha, the bunkar, the nai, the darzi, hard-working people who earned and worked honorably and earned because of their hard work. A lot of them stayed back, and not many who stayed back were from the elite community, the financial elites, although some did. I mean, there are obviously various ways of being elite. You could be an educational elite, you could be financially from the elite segment or whatever. And then, of course, the Indian state has structurally kept Muslims out. There has been society level discrimination, with the result, a lot of the times Hindus don't think of Muslims, even though Muslims are nearly 18%, they don't think of Muslims as people like us, quote unquote. And usme phir wo capitalism ka bhi dakhal hai, that there's this class snobbery that, we're upper middle class, and when we think of Muslims, we think of the working class. They don't use words like the working class for them. They they use more offensive words. They don't imbue them with any dignity for the hard work that they do. So there is this notion of people unlike us, that and they don't realize that a lot of the times, many people in the Muslim community are, say, not formally educated, is because they've been kept out of that system.
Yeah, well, they've
been institutionally discriminated against.
Yeah, well, they also come from the lowest rungs of the caste system. So their situation is pretty much the same as, people who are in the caste hierarchy at the lowest levels. And our understanding in Peace Vigil is that the hate against Muslims is basically a hate against the rebellion, or let us say, the rejection of the caste
system and embracing Islam.
Yeah. So, Gurmehar, tell me, because you told us that, you formally became a Sikh, so you must obviously be interacting with Sikhs at festival time, or going to the Gurdwara, or in general meeting other Sikhs, what has your observation been when it comes to relations with Muslims? Because obviously they know that you're friends with Muslims, a big part of your circle are Muslims. So what happens then? After partition, there has been a lot of hatred that has spread in both communities, Sikhs and Muslims, against each other.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, that's a very interesting question. One of the things I have to say at the outset is that it is a community that is very embracing, And I remember when I first started to go more regularly to the Gurudwara, and I spoke to the Granthiji here locally in the US and talked about exploring exploring the option of a formal embracing of the faith. And one of the first things he said was that you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. You all are welcome, which was a very attractive thing for me to hear, that I'm not going to be pressured in any way to make this conversion. It is of my own volition. And he said, you all are welcome. So that was the first thing he said to me, and I still remember that has stayed with me. And overall, it's just been. I feel very honored and very blessed, and true to my name, I do feel ki Guru ki meher hai. So in that sense, yes, it's been a great experience, and it's sort of enveloped me in this space of warmth and affection and josh and enthusiasm. But that apart, of course, like I said, every community has scope to evolve. Caste is an issue with the Sikh community. That a generally feudal approach is an issue with the Sikh community. There are various other things. But to answer your question about the Sikh-Muslim dynamic, I feel that my sense has been from people in my extended family that I know, and from people I interface with in the Gurdwara and on Zoom and other places, because a lot of it has been happening over Zoom because of the COVID situation. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to going back to the Gurdwara again and eating simple desi food, watching little Punjabi kids play hockey. What's not to like? And then listening to bhajans, listening to Kabir-inspired bhajans. So what's not to like? So about the Sikh-Muslim dynamic, I would say that it is quite mixed and split. There are some people who've grown up on horror stories from the time of the partition of the subcontinent. Some people take away from those stories the fact that it happened to everyone. In some places, Muslims were killed, and in some places, Hindus and Sikhs were killed. So there are some people who are fair-minded or logical, and even though their families have ancestrally suffered greatly, their takeaway is logical and rational and humane. Ki maybe this happened to my family, but it happened to Muslims elsewhere. The same thing happened to Muslims where they were in a minority. So some people have that takeaway, some people don't have that takeaway and may have Islamophobic attitudes. Then there are others who have a great affection for the Muslim community, because also there are elements of cultural overlap between Sikhs and Muslims as well, just as there are between Sikhs and Hindus and Muslims and all the rest of it. But overall, I think there is a trend, no doubt, towards a kind of rapprochement, a kind of bonhomie between Sikhs and Muslims, which heartens me, because it makes me realize that if 70 years back, when the partition of the subcontinent happened and there was so much bloodletting, sadly, I mean, it's one thing for a subcontinent to be split into different countries, and we respect, the identity of Pakistan, the existence of Pakistan. Pakistan के वजूद को हम तस्लीम करते हैं. और मुझे लगता है अब 70 साल हो गए, बड़ी शाइस्तगी से हमें पाकिस्तान के वजूद को तस्लीम करना चाहिए. But I wish the bloodletting, nobody wanted the bloodletting to happen. So with nearly 1 million people dying and all of that, I find it heartening, actually. I choose to look at it in that optimistic way, that if in 70 years after that bloody past, if Sikhs and Muslims can start to bond, maybe in our lifetime we will see the day when Hindus and Muslims start to bond in the same way. If it can happen, it took 70 years, but if it can happen between Sikhs and Muslims, inshallah, it will happen between Hindus and Muslims too.
Ji. And Gurmehar, I see you as a bridge, I think, as a person who can do it, because you were born a Hindu. You became Sikh. Most of your friends are Muslims. You have a love for people of Pakistan and India, and you live in
Kashmir also, because of my
Kashmir.
Long years in Kashmir.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think people like you who, transcend sounds like a very I don't know, lofty word, but I can't think of something else, because it's like going beyond these categories or borders that define us when we are born, right? And that's where our
Right.
conversation started, that there are things that are not in our control. If a Brahmin who is a Brahmin today had been born a Shudra, his life would have been different. And so it's all an accident of birth. But then what you do with your life, if something appeals to you, do you break those barriers? Or as you said, it's not a negation of what you were born into, but it is the
Right.
embracing of something else. And actually, I think if that kind of attitude was adopted by people who
Right.
who were not like people who are not taking on another religion, but just that, okay, I'm just born, I'm born in a place, I had no choice in the matter. But there are others who are born in other spaces and other circumstances, or in other religions
Gee,
and castes,
Gee,
and
and
just
like you
like
said, and
me. Yeah.
I thank you for flagging this. That I'm not in any way ashamed of my Hindu heritage, and I don't say that in a defensive way. I say that in the sense that I draw heavily, even now, from the better parts of the Hindu faith, like especially a concept like Nishkam Karm, which is central to the Hindu faith, or at least, those Hindus who are people of conscience will practice Nishkam Karm, which basically means that you do your duty, without undue attachment to the outcome. I mean, everybody, as long as we're living in this world, we are attached to outcomes, but without being obsessed with the outcome, to do your duty from a place of loving kindness. Because it's not just, karma is not just doing it, doing what is right in an academic, I wouldn't say academic, but in a dry, heartless way. It is coming from a place of loving kindness, doing your duty, but not being unduly attached to the outcome. It's such a glorious concept, which Hindus of conscience will practice. So I do draw heavily from that tradition as well, from the Sufi tradition, from Islamic principles, and the thing is that it's all also about positivity. I know this sounds very new agey, but so I feel that I've always felt that the bigger our dream, and the more people we can include in it. ख्वाब आप जितना बड़ा देखेंगे और जितने लोगों को उसमें शामिल कर सकेंगे, the bigger our dream and the more people we can include in it, the better.
So, I want to know about your work, because as a person, you are a bridge. Certainly, I can see that, given your background. But I want to know how you approach your work in this regard. How did you get into it? I know that you did study mass communication, but the subject matters that you take are very specific. I've seen, it's either India, Pakistan, even if it's Bollywood or, Shairi, it is definitely trying to bridge, act as a bridge. So please tell us about that, about your work.
Right. Yeah. Well, basically, in terms of education, like you said, I have studied mass communication at Jamia Millia Islamia in Delhi. And then I studied at Cardiff University in the UK, which was radio broadcasting. So it's all been broadly in the broadcasting space. And then at the New York Film Academy, I studied screenwriting. So various forms of communication, but, the format varied, but the subjects of interest remain largely constant: art, culture, desi adab, sakafat, all of those things. So I think one of the reasons I feel very full of gratitude in my life at this point, and this has not been the story of my life, but at this point in time, I feel very grateful, is that my work is an extension of who I am, is an extension of my life. So for me, I'm not a careerist in that sense. So for me, my work is an excuse to get out and about into the world, meet people, engage with people, enjoy things, partake of certain things, celebration or music or art, culture, meeting people, forming friendships, connections. Sometimes they lead to work as well. They lead to, a kind of professional solidarity as well, or collaborations, creative collaborations and things like that. So my work really is for me an excuse to get out into the world and engage with the world. And I feel very fortunate that I've got the opportunity to do that. So essentially what I did for The Wire, where we basically talked about, which is a progressive Indian news portal. And basically it was themed around minority issues. I mean, not themed, but the accent was minority issues, but we did take up other themes as well. And that's what I did for The Wire. For Naya Daur, which is Pakistani managed, it is more like a divide between India and Pakistan. But that is the prism or the filter. But with that as the prism or the filter, the subjects have been varied. So it could be cinema, it could be poetry, and it's essentially the human condition. And sometimes when things get fraught and relations are bad, even to say that is inqalabi and revolutionary. Like you talked about one of my social media posts where I basically said that मुसलमान दूध के धुले नहीं हैं, as we say in Hindi, मुसलमान दूध के धुले नहीं हैं, हमारे जैसे इंसान हैं. और आज के हिंदुस्तान में ये कहना भी इनकलाबी हो गया है. So Muslims are not, sort of angels, so to speak. They're human like you and me. But in today's India, even to say that much is considered revolutionary or radical, shall we say. Yeah. So for me, essentially, even in the indo-pak dynamic or with my interface with Kashmiri people, it is essentially recognizing people's essential humanity. And the things that move and shape us are so similar. We are more similar than dissimilar, has been my life experience. You would know better through your reading of psychology and all the rest of it. But my lived reality tells me that people are more similar than dissimilar in terms of what propels them, what motivates them, what drives them, the impulses and the...
Yeah. Especially when they're coming from the same region, they have the same heritage and history. One thing I find, you take so much interest in Bollywood. I saw some of your videos in which you are singing some of the Bollywood songs and then talking about it. So that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. And I enjoy the fact that, even when it comes to Hindi cinema that I have a great love for, I like all kinds of cinema all kinds of films within Hindi cinema, as long as they're well made within the mandate of that film. So I like the more reflective fare, the more highbrow, shall we say, fare. I like the masala films as well, as long as they're well made within that mandate. There can be a well-made masala film and a lousy masala film, or a laboring and, a sort of lumbering, shall we say, boring masala film as well. So there is a Sholay, which is great, crackling fun. And there could be, a Masan, which is such a beautiful, sensitive film. So I enjoy a range of cinema. And I think that's how I am as a person as well. I have a chatty side and a more reflective side.
Yes.
So,
you don't fit in any mold. And I think yes,
and in fact, आपने जो शुरू में कहा, मतलब इब्तिदाई अपने remarks में कहा ना, तमहीद के तौर पे, that this is a show about celebrating difference, as it were. Well, I am somebody who I'm now crossed 40, but I am somebody who was a misfit for most of her life, and a misfit in a very tortured kind of way. So for me, at this stage in my life, I've kind of channeled all of that, and I have greater acceptance socially and otherwise. But that has taken decades in coming. So my childhood was quite lonely and solitary and all the rest of it. So were my teens, for that matter.
So why did you find yourself a misfit? Is it because you
just being people thought I was an oddball because I was different. I've come to embrace that difference now, and and also one gets more socially adept with age and experience, and you learn how to, get along and all of that. But it was much harder when I was younger. So difference is not, the world can be quite antagonistic to people who seem different, and they label them as odd, weird, and all the rest of it, and can shun you for that. Whereas now I find people are far more accepting. And I've been able to channel the many parts of me I've been able to channel my misfittedness, if you will, into something that connects people and, makes connections and draws everyone together. Like I said, I do believe that the bigger your dream and the more people you can take along, the better. But my childhood, my childhood and teens especially were not a time in my life where being different helped me in any way. It was quite tortured, actually. But that's in the past.
Yeah, but I think, Gurmehar, that has to do with the fact that society has been pushing people into identities that are quite artificial. I think as a species, we are supposed to embrace diversity. I don't think we are meant to be.
And not just diversity by way of religion or race or caste, also just personality and character-wise. I think for me, the pushback was not because I was relatively, my family has gone from middle class to upper middle class. They've had that growth. That's their personal financial journey. But still, I mean, I was born a Sharma. I was, so to speak, from a Brahmin family, father in government service. So I was very much part of the system. So the pushback against me was not because I was, I had those things were in place. I should have been privileged. The pushback against me was just because people thought I was an odd person. So there's also that kind of discrimination that happens if somebody is just different as a person.
But I think most of us are, but we are pushed into accepting, a certain definition of who we should be. And I think it starts there, Gurmehar. It starts there, your personal. But then if you accept that, the society will continue to push you. And then, you'll be defined in other ways also, which are very stifling. So, So, Gurmehar, I'd like to end the interview by asking you one last question. I know that you are somebody who looks for hope, and you're always thinking of positive stuff. But how much of a hope do you see for a country like India today, considering that we have a regime which openly promotes hate and division?
Right. Yeah, that's there are many parts to that answer, but I do believe that one must work from a space of hope. Let me put it this way, that I would not say it is a situation without hope. It is not so far. I mean, it is pretty far gone. The divide, the entrenchment, the entrenched attitudes, the divide is getting deeper. It has deepened to a very great extent, I would say. Hopefully not getting deeper, but is quite deep. But I would not go so far as to say that it is absolutely a hopeless situation. And I think we must work with that belief and come from a place of hope and work. And I am also counting on a bunch of things. I'm counting on our history, which is, like I've said in many of my videos, that we have a 1,000-year history, Hindus and Muslims in particular, of coexistence. And even what we call communal riots is not something that we have a 1,000-year history of. It is something that really came to happen in the way we know it now during the period we were colonized. I mean, there was the colonial approach, which we all know about. This is part of mainstream discourse of divide and rule. So, it is not that we are doomed to that, that for 1,000 years, this has been our checkered history, and that there is no other way possible for us to be, that we are inherently so incompatible. That is not the case, So I would like to hope, and at least one works from that position of hope. And then, of course, there have been, in light of, it is very sad that it had to happen in this way, but in light of how badly COVID, for instance, has been mismanaged or not managed, actually, by the current regime, there is a lot of disillusionment that is setting in. There is, of course, and as they say, you can fool some people all the time, all people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. But I think what's also important, apart from, because I'm not an astrologer after all, not a Najumi or a Jyotishi, as they say, so I can't predict the future. But I think what would be helpful for us going forward, for people working in this space, is to construct an alternative, also to present an alternative also when we are critiquing, So not just be critiquing, but to also present positive role models. Like one of the things I've tried to do in videos for the Naya Daur and The Wire is that sometimes you're not directly critiquing Hindutva or Islamist forces or anything, but what you're doing is by a Hindu and a Muslim occupying that space, like you and I occupying this space right now, however we choose to define ourselves. But we are, some people would call us, Sikh and Muslim, or Sikh and or Hindu and Muslim, and whatever. People may choose to mark us out in those ways. Just by our sheer presence, just Shireen and Gurmehar having a conversation, I think sends a positive message.
Absolutely.
So I feel that is important, and also to, like I said before, to take allies wherever you get them, to not seek perfection in your allies, to take allies wherever you can get them, because we need to gather force, gather momentum, because we are contesting the might of the state pretty much, sadly,
True.
And that's not an easy thing to contest. And also, I think to understand where people are coming from psychologically, I would go so far as to say to understand where they're coming from psychologically, like we talked about the crisis of Hindutva masculinity, the crisis of Islamist masculinity, and all of these things. I mean, we need to understand them so that we can deal better, cope and, and calibrate our messaging better.
No, absolutely. We need to have shared spaces where seemingly different people come and just chat, or come and share the space. And I find some of our cultural things could also help us there. So, screen is one way, but, things like dances, cooking, celebrating together, that could be
or cinema for that matter. Like, we don't have to be talking about interfaith all the time.
Yeah.
It could be two people, representing different communities, talking about romance, talking about ishq, talking about dosti,
which you do. I saw, your shows also on poetry and on movies. So that is certainly there. And I also find that people who live outside of India have a better chance at doing it and showing it to the rest of the world, because we have spaces still left, where people of different religions and nationalities do interact. In India, that is becoming less and less so. And I think, Gurmehar, the last thing I would say is that hope is a very beautiful thing, should never be abandoned. But hope without strategy tends to fail. And that is where organizations like us, like Peace Vigil, but others are doing it too. They and the work of anybody who's actually thinking of alternatives, because you talked of alternatives. I think, that's where our focus needs to be. Because after analysis...
You use the word alternative, and that's Mutabadil TV, which means Mutabadil means alternative. That's in fact the third organization that I should have mentioned I work for.
Yeah, I mentioned.
So Mutabadil is with Atif Tawqir, and they literally Mutabadil means alternative. It is to provide an alternative.
Perfect.
Vision, worldview. Yeah.
Perfect. So when we mention Peace Vigil, the tag there is Peace Vigil makes practical tools to dismantle hate. And that's our thing, that we actually offer the know-how and the tools by which hate can be dismantled. Because analysis is one thing. What do you do with it? Do you have a strategy to fight it? And one of the strategies, I think, is, as you said, to find friends, to make alliances, not to continue alienating everybody who comes your way. So, that's my take from this conversation. If there is anything else that you think I've missed, please do add.
No, I think that is a good way of summing it up. Yes.
Okay. So thank you so much, Gurmehar, for taking time out.
My pleasure.
It was really good speaking to you.
Likewise.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The D Word, a show about differences. Today's guest was Gurmehar Kaur, who talked about the need to embrace different things and to find unity through an embracing of many different ways. Please do remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel and share with your friends. On behalf of Peace Vigil, this is Samir. Thank you for listening.